welcome everybody to our third and so far in plans last Fireside chat. Hi, Aithan. This is a series of events that we created in order to welcome you to the Inspire and Impact conference that we are planning for May. We finally have a date, so please put it in your agenda, the 17th of May. More details will come in shortly. You will be able to see it on our website and other social media. For those of you who have never been here, who don't know Polaris and don't know what we do and why we are even here, let me welcome you very, very warmly, because this is one of those first days of spring, and I think wherever you are in the world, I hope you have seen some sun. Polaris, the North Star, this is an organization set up 5 years ago in the Netherlands, aiming to make gender equality reality one day, hopefully sooner rather than later. We hope not to have to exist. However, for the time being, we are here and we provide a platform for networking, development, inspiration, and impact. And that's why we are here. We have invited amazing guests, Joanna and Aithan. If you have never met them, this is really your chance. And I would love to invite them to tell a few words about themselves. Joanna would begin tonight, if it's all right.
Well, apparently it is.
All right.
Yes.
Hashtag leading to the unknown. That's our hashtag. Please tag us everywhere and tweet about it, talk about it. Hashtag leading into the unknown.
Yes, thank you, Julia, and thank you, Polaris, for having another beautiful evening meeting. In Poland, we switched to summertime, but it's dark anyway. It's still dark here. So I'm hoping for spring and summer sun sessions soon. But apart from weather, I'm based in Warsaw, Poland right now, and we are heading for another lockdown period. So I was just sharing with the girls prior to our start that I don't know if I can actually point to the moment that we stopped having one of the lockdowns and started a new one. Basically, we locked down again. And me as a psychologist, it's a great chance to actually accompany people who are trying to make sense out of what is happening. And it's a challenge. And the theme topic that we're going to cover today, grief. So one of the beautiful and most complex emotions that we face in everyday life is something that so many people right now are experiencing in Poland, myself included, like letting go of the things that we wish were alive and introducing ourselves to the new stuff that are just being born. So this is the topic, and I am privileged to have a conversation between Aithan, Julia, and all the participants on Zoom and also on Facebook. So I'm thankful for taking time and energy and spending it with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Aithan, the floor is yours.
I'm so glad to be with you guys, and you guys being everyone that's here. I'm recognizing faces at this point. It's wonderful. So I'm glad to see all of you. And just to share, of course, I met Julia some months ago now, doing and discussing subjects like this. And I've been we connected our minds, we connected our hearts, we connected what we're seeing in the world happening and what's happening internally for us as that's happening, and connecting that way. And I've had the privilege of doing the same with Joanna and connecting with her over some months. And our conversations for me are really rich around what can we learn about what's happening internally for each of us. Like I can say, what am I learning about what's happening for me right now that actually applies in the big picture to what's happening in the world? And there's actually a very strong connection between those two things. And anyway, that's what some of the kind of core elements to what we bring to this conversation are. So thanks so much. I'm glad to be together with you.
Thank you very much, Aithan. Today's topic will be our favorite, I think, letting go and the importance of grief in our lives. That's a topic that probably nobody has expected. I don't think this is something that we would be looking forward to, because it means so much to us, and probably that's why it's also on our minds even when we don't talk about it. So we decided to make the unknown a little bit more known, put it on the table, talk about it, and just dive in. Shall we? I hope everybody's ready. We also had some homework for everyone to bring something with you. We will get to that. So if you have your, or if you don't, you still have the time to get it. A small dish, a bowl, a little bit of a piece of paper, Post-it, something to write on, something to write with, and matches or a lighter. So that's something for the end of the session. So if you don't have it yet, you still have the time to arrange. I think the time has come to dive into grief. Who would like to kick it off? Aithan?
Sure. I was maybe one way to enter the conversation. I was recently talking to a group of cardiologists at a hospital, and when we talk about grief, people on the front line of what's been going on this last over a year now, and seeing so much trauma happen around them. And what's interesting is from people on the front lines in the conversation, the suffering and the trauma and the challenge that they're facing, we could say is the mass death that they're experiencing, literally grieving death. And in other ways, the trauma they've experienced, in many ways as medical professionals, they've signed up for that practice, especially as a cardiologist. I mean, literally the thing that keeps us alive, right? That sound, that beeping, that so on, that is keeping life, sustaining life, and how fragile and nuanced those sounds are. But what the trauma is that we really ended up having conversation around is how they're not able to support each other on the team. The trauma of, I want to provide service and I can't. The trauma of, I don't have enough tools to do my work. I can't educate the legacy of the next generation of medical professionals the way I want them to. I mean, I can't support their well-being. I can't support. So there's all this trauma that's happening that is separate than grieving just the death, which already is so massive for all of us. And so one thing is kind of like the nuance of grief when we talk about it that I wanted to share with this is that the nuance of grief doesn't have to only be applied to death of a person, death of, but death of a practice, death of, in a moment, something that I'm holding on to that I might need to let go of. So I just wanted to open that as part of the conversation. And I think maybe I'll pass to Joanna.
Yeah, because it's with grief, at least in Poland, but I guess it's not only assigned to this country, but I guess we've attached grief to losing a person. But I think for the past 12 months, we've lost people, and I want to acknowledge that. But we've lost dreams, hopes, expectations, as simple as, some people were planning to get married over the course of the last 12 months and having huge parties with friends and family. Some people were planning on traveling around the world. Some people were planning to study and meet new people. And now all they are stuck is Zoom and Teams and whatever they're using. So I guess, and there's this description in psychology that we call ambiguous grief. So grieving something that is hard to grasp, grieving something that is hard to put your finger on. It's a dream, expectation, and hope. So I think globally, like literally globally, we are all experiencing grief. And the magic part about grief is once you make unconscious conscious, it's a fruitful process. It brings life to something new, but it has to be acknowledged. And I think we have to be aware of what is happening inside of us. And we don't like grief. We like, the culture around us says, happy, sunny. Even myself, I was pointing to that. It's like right now dark in Poland. Like, we don't like dark. We like sunny. But I think grasping both, like combining both, integrating light and dark, night and day and happiness and grief is something we have to face right now. it's a must if we want to enter the unknown, because entering the unknown, part of it is leaving something behind, and you cannot do it without grieving, without saying goodbye to stuff. So in my personal life, I've been grieving so many projects over the course of 12 months, like so many potential dream kind of projects. There was a shift into something else that I couldn't even imagine, but there's like a void in between the old ones and the new one. And I had to face the void of not knowing what's going to happen next, and trusting myself, but also in my case, because spirituality is a huge part of my life, and trusting that is something that is going to help me make this transition. But I think what's the most difficult part about grieving is the void in between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can all speak to that, to what we have all been grieving, and that's something where we would like to also open the floor soon for comments. So if you feel like already letting us know what have you been grieving for, what are you letting go of, please put it in the chat. We will get back to you. I think it's also a good moment to have a look at that presentation style. We are going to put a slide here so that we are still kind of connected to the old world. What grief is, according to Brené Brown. Maybe you could let us a little bit guide us through this definition of grief, Joanna.
Yes, in her book, Rising Strong, which is a book on how to deal with challenges, difficult moments in life, she points that one of her discoveries, how people deal with managing those situations, is facing grief. And grief consists of three components. The first one is loss. So we actually lost something, and it can be a person, or it can be, as I said, something we cannot point to, like a dream or hope, or something more of a spiritual, from a spiritual realm. So it's loss, it's longing, because we are still longing for something that is long lost or gone, or we had to say goodbye to. And the third quality is that we have to reorient ourselves. We have to try to figure out a new way of working, for example, or a new way of having conferences around the world, or doing workshops. And in my case, like facilitating workshops with teams. I would normally travel around, but we, meaning myself, the companies, the employees, also families, homeschooling is a way of trying to reorient ourselves. So loss is one piece, longing for something that we want to come back alive, and reorienting ourselves. And it's when we say these three words, loss, longing, and reorienting, these are huge psychological processes, and they take time, and they have their own dynamics, and they require emotional agility, so that we could sort of like dive into them, but also not be flooded by them. So we have to sort of dive and swim with them, trying to figure out how to find ourselves in the ocean of emotions that we're all swimming in right now. Aithan, maybe you can point to something that you find useful when dealing with grief.
Sure, I just really appreciate, Joanna, what you were saying about integrating the two. And so what I often think about is like, what's the opposite of grief? Or what are we doing here? So I'll give you an example. I often think in terms of art. And if you're going to, if an artist is going to take a white sheet of paper and make a painting about light, or make a drawing about light, right? They want to make it very bright. They want to make it very white. So the first thing an artist will do, is grab a piece of charcoal or something dark and start drawing with dark. And they're actively trying to make it lighter. How do you make the white of the piece of paper whiter than the white of the piece of paper, right? You just take the part and you make it dark around it. And the darker you make it around it, and you're actively working. So your practice and your nuance with working with dark is your practice and your nuance with celebrating the light. And so I think we can inverse that as well. When we're experiencing, what do you do when you love someone? How do you show love in the many ways each person on this call, each person shows love? Isn't that another way to do grief? Isn't that what grief is? And the better I can grieve is actually the better I can express my love. And maybe my entire life with this person or with this practice has been a growing love for that. And now I can love it by grieving it. And we have so much practice in the way, Joanna, you said it, I think so elegantly, like just kind of allowing new things to come in, celebrating what's coming, celebrating how, a new startup of an idea, a new something, like inviting newness to our life, a new year, a new day, a new, whatever those customs, rituals, and so on. That's another way of doing longing. Right? And so, and I think that we're longing for that next cycle. We're longing for that next thing. So the better that we can introduce newness, now you shift it. How do I introduce my longing for something? And there's a very strong correlation and integration of the two. So I'd love to offer that on the table for us and the way we each practice those things.
I think it would be great if we could see if somebody has already shared anything with us. I don't see any comments yet in the Zoom. Let's see on Facebook. Perhaps there is already a comment or a question related to that topic. And in the meantime, I think that's exactly something that we talked about last time. I think that the light without darkness, that one doesn't exist without the other, right? It's we, as much as we want to keep the light, there's nothing we can do about it, right? We cannot keep it, we cannot hold it. It's more difficult to hold on to something sometimes than to let go. Maybe it's not something that we are aware of, but theoretically, it's more difficult to hold on to the rope than to let go. Physically. Is it the same when it comes to our emotions? Is it similar when it comes to our thoughts and how we analyze grief, how we go through it?
I think it's when we're trying to understand grief, like going into it with our mind, it's okay, but there are better tools to actually go through it. And Aithan, you mentioned rituals and traditions and tools, sort of religious but also non-religious traditions that help us deal with grief. And help us approach it but not from an intellectual point of view, but from the emotional and also the spiritual point of view. And I was visiting my parents a couple months ago, and when we were having dinner or something, my mom got a call that one of our close family members died just suddenly. And immediately my family, like 12 to 15 people, immediately we stopped eating and chatting and discussing and kids playing around. And because I was brought up in a Catholic family, so every time I go there I sort of sunk back in. But immediately once we got the news, we stopped eating, and there's a special prayer in Catholic Church when people die. So it was like I was so, because I'm not Catholic anymore, it was just so, it was a beautiful moment for me to see. I don't want to flatten the purpose of religion, but I just want to point out that the beautiful side of religious rituals, it's letting people know or teaching them how to deal with it. So they have a prayer for that situation and this situation and that moment and this moment. So it's like a tool. It's like a sort of a mantra that you can use to deal with grief. So you don't have to figure it out by yourself. You have some support. It's different in different religions, I guess, and it's different for people who do not believe in those kinds of things. But I think if we use what we already know, it helps us get through it. So maybe in the chat box and also on Facebook, people can share with us their ways, rituals, ideas, how they deal with grief. What do they do to actually go into it and experience the whole thing?
It doesn't have to be best practice. It's more, how do you go through it? What do you do? How do you grieve? I guess we can wait for some answers to come in. The chat is open both on Facebook and on Zoom, so please share with us. It can be also just a one word prayer is one of them, right? Just as an example.
You know, as people are doing this, something else that comes to mind that I just wanted to, I got a big hit of this that I want to offer. And I see some things coming in already on the chat, so that's terrific. Is that I'm starting to notice a relationship to another person. And there's like two core things that are on my mind with it. And one is that I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but I can at least with like comparative grief. Like I'm suffering, but I know somebody out there really just XYZ you might say about what's going on for somebody else. So my grief doesn't matter as much. Right. So I was like, okay, but somebody else has it worse. And that's like almost like a caveat that we often share. It could be even as close as like my partner, right? That my partner, the person I live with, is experiencing something. My goodness, you know, in my case, my wife, wow, you know, who's more tired right now? And can I be tired if she's doing this, or can she be tired if I've just done this? And actually, can we both just be tired? And because they're both true. And so to invite the possibility that your grief matters, that optimism and grief aren't contradictory, you know, they don't compete necessarily, and it's just part of being optimistic. It's in support of that, and optimism is in support of the grief as well, in reverse. And that the second thing is with other is that everyone has a different way of doing it, you know. And I think, Joanna, you said so wonderfully, you know, I come with this upbringing. People have a religious practice. Every culture has their practice for grieving. Every person has their evolving and changing practice for, but the idea of allowing someone else to have it. So first, permitting myself to have it next to the others. Second, how do I make space for you to do it and not think worse, less, have any judgment, but in fact, inviting that in whatever way you need to, I don't need to fix it. I just need to support it and allow it to be out there because you're going through this thing in a way, and I can be supportive and listen to it. So those two things are really core that I just really, you know, when it comes to another person and this collective grieving that we're all going through.
Yeah, I think that's what you mentioned, Aithan, about the fact that we allow ourselves, do we allow others to grieve? Are we uncomfortable with somebody else's grieving? Are we uncomfortable with our own grieving? Can't we can't wait to get out of it? If we rush, does it help? And then doesn't really help to put more effort on trying to stop something that's going to happen anyway, right? These are all questions I think many of us have dealt with. Let's see what comes up in the chat. I see that Anya mentioned that the way she deals with grief is by togetherness. We are creating a nice library here of interesting solutions. So if anybody's inspired, please let us know. Ingrid says that it's crying, letting her emotions go. And she's also very good at not showing it and sharing it. So both somehow. Dick is saying that he pulls back in a virtual corner to allow processing it internally. So that's a virtual corner. I would like to know more about that virtual corner. I don't know about you. That sounds interesting. Anya mentions time. Time. Anka says that for her, there have been different stages. Deep emotional suffering, where she is really has really allowed herself to feel. Distraction, learning to never say no and experience everything new. So that's more or less along the process that Joanna was talking about earlier, about longing and looking for the newness. And then locking it in a box and visiting only from time to time. So we've got quite a big range of different ways of dealing with grief through cultures, and also, of course, everybody is different, so that we have to take it into account. I don't see any suggestions on Facebook, just checking, so I'm not hearing yet. However, it's open, so
yes, it's open.
whoever is there, please share with us, because we can learn from these ideas.
I want to point to what Anya mentioned, time, but also to Aithan, what you mentioned about the ways we deal with grief. Because again, I have the impression that we might fall into the trap of thinking that there's only one way of grieving, that there are stages and you have to do this or that, you cannot do this or that. And again, I'm going to go back to my experience, is that in Poland, there is this tradition, not all of us follow it, but there's like this strong tradition that if somebody dies, we have to grieve for a year, and we have to wear black clothes, or at least used to. There was a part of a history that we have to wear black, and we have to mourn, and we have to basically be sad all the time. And one of my female colleagues, a couple years ago, she lost her fiance in a brutal plane accident. And the way she was dealing with grief was through dance, stand-up comedy, moving around, writing poems. So a very different path to the traditional one. And she even wrote a short article about it, that she was judged for doing it a different way. She was accused of not dealing it in a proper way, and she was accused of going too fast, like going too fast into dancing or going too fast into something. So it was just a beautiful reminder that, first of all, it's different for every single person, and there's freedom in choosing ways you want to dance with grief. So I just want to remind all of us that for some people, it can take a week or a month or 2 years, and they can try to deal with grief in a very different way that would be of our choice. So it's just a reminder to all of us that there's a beautiful variety of dealing with grief. And I'm sure that people who are in this call today probably know it, but I just want to let out in the world that there's, in psychology, there's no one good way. There are plenty ways that are good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it would be a good moment to also share that another quote that can help us take this conversation to the next stage. Of course, I didn't click it like it's supposed to be now. It's about avoiding, hiding away, not wanting to see. Yet the light and the darkness want to come together, and the heart wants to be full one way or the other. So how is it with the judgment of how we get to do this? I think that judgment is coming up already a couple of times, right? Not any two hearts are the same. How should we deal with this? What do we do, especially these days, when we are surrounded by everybody who is also grieving? Everybody right now is grieving in the world. Yes, we are not afraid of silence on our calls. Perhaps it's not done on many Zooms, but yeah, for us, it's part of the process. We can leave this.
Funny enough, just want to say, I want to say something about silence. Funny enough, silence is also a way of grieving things. Like feeling so comfortable with not saying a word, not doing anything, just being, is something that can also be a tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, it's like when an orchestra starts to play, you can almost grieve the silence that was there a moment before.
it's just like the full orchestra, and then the reverse, right? It's like the silence after an orchestra plays is like, oh, where'd it go? And it's that transition between one thing and another thing that I think I'm seeing in that quote, in the circle, in the mending, is just that when change happens, we need to recognize this transition from one thing to the next. And change can be a momentary, I didn't have a home, I signed a piece of paper, now I'm a homeowner. So like in a moment, I'm a homeowner, but the actual transition to becoming a homeowner, that's very different from never owning a home to owning a home, and what it means and what's going to happen. And those moments where it's just like a moment change versus a transition change, and how grief is not like a moment. Okay, I did that, that's all done. But it's like a it's guiding us through the transition. And again, I'll move back to art for a moment, but just that creativity honors destruction. You almost have to, the first part of creating is to destroy. And there's an elegance in destroying. It's not just grabbing a hammer and boom, but just how do we almost kind of rip ourselves open, rip some idea open without having to mend it right away, but just to look at what's in there. Maybe rearrange the parts when we recognize what's there, and then consider, do we need to put it back together? How do we put it back together? What are the parts we need to put back together? Rather than wrapping it up in a bow and say, okay, did that, what's next? So that's kind of what I think we're offering here to each other. And I see some other comments coming in the chat. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I think it would be good also to mention these comments, because perhaps there is something on that topic as well. So Daniela, I think she was responding still to the question, how is she grieving? She mentioned that she's talking about it as much as she can, and she's cherishing the memory of the lost one. Monica says that she's reconnecting with nature, looking at the ocean, and doing some mindful walking and meditation. When we talk about different ways of grieving, and that there is no one process, there is no one way, there is no one size fits all. There is a recognition by Nicola that everyone has a different experience, and everybody is different that way. And what does mending then mean in the context of grieving? I think that's what you just talked about, Aithan, about putting things apart, and the demolition is indeed a beautiful process. I went through a demolition behind my house, watching another house being demolished. Amazing process, I have to say. I loved it. Also, it wasn't mine, so it's perhaps the detachment helped, that I could be an observer, but it was a parallel to what was happening in my life at the time. And that mending, what happens when you put down a building, you create space for something else to be there. It's not necessarily going to be the same house. It's not going to be built from the same materials. It might be something completely different, but something might still be useful and used for mending. I think that we have the connecting back, right? Comment from you, Joanna. Perhaps you would like to expand on this. And I see a couple of questions. Maybe I'll just mention them before we go further. For Dick, that helplessness that comes with grief is what makes it hard to stand in the fire of it, that you're helpless. And we have a question from Katarzyna that's coming from Facebook. Do you think that there is space for grief in a corporate world? Is there grief acceptance? So we've got some interesting topics to go back to: mending, fire of grief, and corporate world and grieving. What do you think? Was it you, Joanna, or was it Monica? I think Monica.
It was Monica. so I just.
Sorry.
It's all right.
No, but maybe you want to add something.
Yeah. Feel free if you wanted to mention something, of course. The floor is open. But I think, Joanna, you wanted to say something as well.
Yes, going back to mending piece and connecting back, it's usually not going back to the same thing that was prior to the lost part. So it's, as you beautifully described with the house. Once we demolish one, it's even though if we're going to use the same materials to build a new one, it's going to be a different one, for the reason that for many reasons, it's just going to be a new one. And this is the thing that we don't like that much. I think the popularity of McDonald's and stuff is because people get exactly what they expect, no matter where they are in the world. Like they do not have to grieve the taste of French fries in Dubai because they're missing the ones that they bought in Paris or whatever. Because we like, as human beings, as species, we just like having things that we know. But grief invites us to do something different, to face something that is just being born, and not always we're not always comfortable with that, and that where helplessness comes in, like jumps in immediately, because we have to sort of, for a time being, be a student, not the teacher. And we don't, especially the older we get, the more often we want to be the wise ones, like the teachers, the mentors, and the whole pandemia, COVID-19, just brought us back to the school of life, and like, you're all going to be students again. Like, let's rearrange. And part of being a student is dealing with learning things as we go, and we like things to be explained to us, when you like having first, steps, step after step after step. And it's not like that with grief. It's not a linear process. It's a windy, it's a crazy process, and we don't like that. We don't like helplessness. We don't like the unknown. We like, being wise. So yeah, but it's a great question about the corporate world. So maybe Aithan, you can jump in with is there space for that in the corporate world?
Yeah.
I think that what happens with things like grief, things like loss, when there's a lot of changing systems around us, like in the corporate world, even pre-COVID, technology, the speed of change, and I'm the world's expert at X, and now that's not going to fly because Y just happened, and so I need to preserve what I know. And those kinds of experiences that are upheaving for us, when that thing happens and we just need to embrace the next, the new, the thing that, the danger of not dealing with that is that it doesn't go away. We could hide it. We can like put it in our pockets or put it over here, or it might be a sense of pride or of power or of confidence that I can just, I can do this. I can get through this. I've gone through other things in my life and I can get through this. And when we do that, it doesn't go away. It just comes out in really weird ways and unexpected ways at unexpected times in the workplace, just like it does in our families, in our private life. So we're not putting it away. We're just like moving it, and it's going to show up. We're still sitting on it, and one day we're going to move our, ooh, what was that? And here it comes, and it's coming out in this really unexpected way. So is there space? My answer to that is I believe that it's dangerous if we don't make space, because that space is going to show up in the wrong time or the wrong way, or a place that actually makes us less productive, even though the goal is to be more productive, more effective, more efficient in those things. Actually, it's doing us a disservice to those very reasons that we're actually covering it up. And at the same time, becoming more masterful at it, and more masterful at making a culture where we're able to do that, and get in the mess of it, will allow us to handle many other things beyond grief, like taking on new things, like collaboration on any project, like coming up with new ideas. But that ability that grief offers us, and making space for that, and building a culture with the skills, the skill tree underneath the skill of grief, What are the other skills that I need in order to grieve? That I can form a culture that supports your grief and my grief and allow us to do this can actually propel the way we work with organizations within our organizations in a really complex and powerful movement forward.
Mm. And have you seen examples of such cultures, corporate cultures, where they embrace grieving, they give that space?
Yeah, so deliberately developmental organizations. One great book that gives a lot of examples of that is An Everyone Culture by Robert Keegan. And you'll see a lot of different organizations and moments in culture where people are deliberately supporting each other's growth, deliberately supporting each other beyond the job that needs to get done. But actually, what's the internal job that needs to get done to support the long term of all of us working together and the legacy of the organization? So I think that book is a great, has many examples. And in the work that I've done hands-on with people is I can speak to specific moments and speak as a culture where when we've addressed those things on teams, productivity goes in an exponential way, long term especially.
And what have you seen that didn't go so well?
Yeah, oftentimes, as a consultant, many times I'll come into an organization and I'll say, well, here's the 5 things that aren't working, but they're really all into this one thing. And then say it's collaboration, right? We want to learn to collaborate differently. And so there might be a challenge, a product that they're trying to bring out, or a service they're trying to bring out. And we'll talk about what the challenges are and try to address them. And what I find is that what we uncover as we're doing it is all those moments of grief and other things that have been happening that have really confused the actual challenge. So it doesn't go well is when we're so focused on addressing a problem and a solution rather than the communication between people that actually is what's needed to solve the problem. And I can be more specific, but I'm just going to leave it open for a moment. If you'd like, I'm just happy. I don't want to take up too much time.
I think I will. I think we have a lot of time to maybe talk about it in the next meeting that we have on the 17th of May. We can go more into detail of that. Now we have 14 minutes left. So perhaps it would be good to also connect on, I see that there is already support that relationships matter coming from Dick, our next speaker in April, on the 12th of April. The topic will be relationships. So that communication will be the crucial part of it. So hopefully it can also be addressed there. I see that we have a very long comment, so if you don't mind, I will go quickly. I will try to not too quickly, but quickly go through it and bring it to us. There's also a comment from Justin on how he grieves, that he tends to comfort the people who are close to the loss. And it also helps him when he can reminisce about a person or a topic with people who were close to that person. So it also helps him while he is helping others. I think this hasn't come up yet until now, but it's also good to mention that option. And Anya says that this thought will be about the loss induced by COVID-19. There was a big national holiday coming up in my neighborhood last year. It's festive, all about crowds and celebrating together. We could have all gotten sad that we cannot have it the same way in 2020, but instead some neighbors put together a game, scavenger hunt for the neighborhood kids. It was safe, distanced, and all of the measures were taken care of. But the kids were ecstatic, and the adults were talking to the neighbors sometimes for the first time. And that really was something that showed that the world was more rushed in a way. So also like they were. And Anya thinks that sometimes it takes one good idea, and that the followers that will help to pivot after a loss. So that's another thought on that topic. So the story is to be read in chat if anybody is interested. Please have a look as well. Perhaps that's something that could be repeated because we are all in a lockdown. So another way. Just so that we are good on time, we've got 12 minutes left. Do we have time to do the exercise now? Or should we maybe talk about that caring for others while caring for ourselves?
What do you think, Joanna? Curious.
My gut says we should do the activity.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
that we can experience actually literally the fire of grief.
Going back to one of the first questions and comments there. I think that would be, so if you haven't gotten it yet, and if you would like to participate, whether you are on Zoom or on Facebook, please find your ceramic bowl, pot, anything that can hold something that's burning, a piece of paper, a pen, yeah, exactly, I need to find it as well, and matches or a lighter. So
and if you lack any one of those three beautiful things, you can just pick up a piece of paper and just write things down and do the whole piece later on. So that, because I'm not sure that we all are equipped with matches and ceramic bowls right away, but just in case somebody's missing one of those pieces.
And sometimes it's good to do it outside anyway, in a more controlled environment, maybe not in the house. So you have to stay safe. That's the most important part. Stay safe. Whatever.
So if you're driving, don't do it.
If you're too close to the fire detector, smoke detector, also please don't do it. Would you like to guide us through the exercise?
You mean Joanna or you mean Aithan?
I think it would be both of you.
Okay, so I'll start and maybe Aithan, you can just jump in later on. So the activity is the one that I got familiar through my therapist. I was working through some personal stuff like years ago, and she and I just came across all the misconceptions that I have around the topic that I was dealing with back then, which was femininity and sexuality. So her invitation was to actually grab a piece of paper and write down all the, as I said, misconceptions I have around the topic. So all the things that I was brought up with, all the things that the culture around me just put into my mind. And I wanted to write down the things that I want to let go of. So, for example, thinking, and while I'm giving you the instruction, just think of the things you want to let go of, no matter what the topic or what the area of your life you're considering right now. Just think of the things you want to let go of. Because back then I wanted to let go of all the things that the negative things that I have around being a female or a strong female or with my sexuality involved. So I was writing down like, it's not good to be feminine, blah, 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 blah. So please think for a second right now, what are the thoughts, ideas that might be stopping you from moving on? So what are the things that you want to let go of? The ideas that you have, the things that block you in moving forward, and write them down. For example, it can be, I'm not creative enough, or I am not educated enough, or I am too difficult to be in a relationship, or I have a failed marriage behind me. I will never fall in love again. Like, write down all the things that you are ready to face and ready to set on fire so that it transforms into ash and it evaporates, clearing the space for something totally new. So maybe you'll have like a minute and a half to write down the things that you're ready to face and let go of. So there are 30 seconds left.
I think the time has come.
So Aithan, before we light it up, is there anything you would like to add to the process?
I just think in a short phrase to say a quote that I'm going to not say entirely correctly, but the quote is from Rumi, and it's that the cracks, the openings, the holes are the place where the light comes in. And what we're about to do is not to fix anything. Nothing is broken. It's not to fix another because they're not broken, but to bring light into the cracks. And that the moment, it's another Rumi quote, that we can harness the power of love. It will be, and this is love for ourselves, love for others, love for just the power of love, to harness it fully and to work with it. It will be as though we've discovered fire for the second time. Joanna.
So let's discover the power of fire, because fire has this beautiful quality of transforming things from one form to the other. And right now, what is about to happen, and Julia, if you're so kind to show it to us once you light it up, so that we can see that it actually changes its form into something else.
Yeah.
But
Ready.
so once you're going to start matching, lighting up the paperworks, just say inside yourself or to yourself that I'm letting go of these things. I'm letting go. I'm letting those misconceptions, ideas, the things that were holding me back, they were stopping me from engaging into the unknown. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Thank you on my own behalf. Going through this on air, I have to say it's an interesting process. I'm glad we have the silence as a tool that we can use anytime, because sometimes there are no words. And thank you very much for guiding us through this, for this amazing hour of transformation, of letting go, of grieving, of learning to grieve together, of sharing with each other how we grieve and what we do, and inviting each other to be with one another while we grieve. Not wait after, just be there, because we are all going through this. Thank you so much, Joanna, and thank you so much, Aithan. Thank you, everyone on Zoom, and thank you, everybody on Facebook. Thank you to the whole Polaris for making this possible. Really, our volunteers are amazing, and I would like to thank them from the bottom of my heart for not just for today, for everything that they do every day so that we can be here, meet here, share ideas, and get better and stronger together. And I would like to also invite everybody to join us on May 17th for a much more extended hour into, I think we will do 3 hours of that magnitude as today. So we will put the 3 fireside chats. Well, fireside, we finally made it happen, right? We didn't choose it consciously at the beginning, but
it has chosen us, Julia.
It has chosen us. That's it. There are no coincidences. It was meant to be. So on May 17, we meet again. The registration is open. I will also make sure that everybody receives the invitation personally, and whoever participated today on Zoom, and everybody else is welcome to go to Eventbrite or our website and find us and join us again for more of what we're doing now, of more what we did, and more to come that we haven't had the chance to do yet.
And I'm tempting to say that for more fireworks.
Fireworks. Perfect. So luckily today we are on time to finish exactly at 9 o'clock. So thank you again, everyone. If there are any questions, any comments later, please send them to us. We can also share with Joanna and Aithan for our next meeting so that we can prepare and start off as we are in our team all together. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.